Hello, welcome, and mellow greetings, one and all. You are tuned in to Frivolous Gravitas, hosted by yours truly, Christopher Driver, and my trusty Ubermensch extraordinaire, my captain, Mr. Jordan Roy. I don't need to reread it. Today we'll be led through the darkness to shed some light on oft misrepresented quote and figure out what it is exactly that Mr. Nietzsche is trying to communicate to our readers. And I will read you the quote in question just for specificity's sake. Battle not with monsters, lest ye become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. Quote from Good and Evil.
Yeah, it's from Beyond Good and Evil, number 146.
Awesome book.
So this quote it's always been around, when you're a teenager, it just sounds so cool. It's one of those things that has that element of, I guess, Megan told me of this word that I learned recently called deepity. And deepity is something that sounds smart. It sounds intensely deep, and it's like, whoa, makes you go, whoa, that's deep. What does it mean? This is definitely a good example of that, but it does actually have some substance to it beyond like, dude, that's deep. So
we should do an episode just on deepity.
Oh, we should. We could like find out, because when you're a teenager, stuff like this fits right in with like Linkin Park lyrics and
Silverchair.
Just all this terrible stuff that's just, it gets your edgy teenage biology just going, and you're just like, yeah, I'm living in the abyss in my mom's basement and being 13 or something. Like, ooh, yes, you're so but I've been thinking about this for a while, because I've been noticing something even in myself lately. So this does not make this too much of a confession episode. But one of the things that I've been noticing is that, given that this thing has it's probably his most famous quote, aside from, God is dead, Gott ist tot. And so you end up just saying it over and over and over again. It doesn't mean anything, and it's lost a lot of meaning. It doesn't have any meaning. In fact, in looking it up and reading Beyond Good and Evil, I think this is my first time diving into Nietzsche, but there's not even too much context to be had. 146 there is its own section in a paragraph with no context and doesn't have any relation to everything. It's just in a part of the book that has a list of maxims and interludes. So part 4, maxims and interludes. That's it. The whole chapter is just one little aphorism after another until part 5, when he gets back into, actually telling you what he's thinking about. So
to me, it's like a primer. You know what I mean? Like he's setting a stage with a whole bunch, like just throwing around the esoteric of his writings or of his thought process or whatever, I think.
Yeah. Some of these, and they don't really, in Revenge and in Love, woman is more barbarous than man. Sounds cool. It's an element of truth in there. There's truth in there, I guess.
But it's poetic too.
Poetic. And he's got all these thoughts that really, it's kind of like the miscellaneous thoughts that he had that don't really belong anywhere else. One is punished most for one's virtues. Well, yeah, I get
no
that.
good deed unpunished. Same deal.
But this one has, for some reason, struck a chord with our society and has stuck like a trinket that you can't get rid of. But lately it's being it's been really I don't think I want to make that illusion. It's really been hitting home, and it actually has been starting to make sense to me, and I kind of want to go into that. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is, well, I guess the darkness itself. And I guess you could take this in the literal fashion. You get if you think like your enemy, and this is one of those discussions that, philosophers like to have, that, you are engaging with a, mortal foe. You are, you're fighting a war on something. You're having you're fighting for your freedom in court or something. And you have to know what your enemy is doing. So you need to, think like them to some extent. And this is definitely a danger. So, you're fighting Nazis. So what would the Nazis do? And you try and put yourself into the headspace of, a Nazi. And then all of a sudden, you start thinking like one. And this is dangerous because how you win a war matters just as much as, winning the war itself. And I think our side did it okay. We didn't. We definitely made a few missteps. But this debate, though, is a little too literal for what I'm thinking. And I guess, is it actually a bad thing when you try and put yourself in the headspace of your enemy while you're thinking? And I don't know if that's even a worthy debate at this point, because you can separate your enemy's actions from your own. But you do have the chance of like, well, he's killing enemy civilians, so we can too, right? And so that's a possibility. And I think this only pertains to weak-willed individuals who can't see the options in front of them. It's like, oh, well, if the enemy is killing people, I should kill people. No, you can use more creative tactics and strategies and then get your thing done. And I think that's all I really need to say about that literal aspect of that. But
what are some other types of darknesses, like depressions?
That's kind of what I want to get into, is that we have more, I think, relevant to this is we do have those darknesses within inside of us. It's the darkness of our own souls. If you believe in souls or not, doesn't really matter for the purposes of this conversation, that we're going to just use that as a metaphor or reality. So the darkness within yourself is, I think, more what he's talking about. We have a darkness within ourselves in the Jungian sense. Excuse me. And we kind of need it. We can't go around being nice to everybody. We can't go around being pleasant all the time. We can't go around being, inoffensive, because you just won't get anything done. There are people who live in the darkness, and you need to deal with them for a bit on their terms. I remember distinctly dealing with one of my rental owners, which I've talked about before. And I actually had to be quite belligerent with him in order to get anything done. And it ended up ending up in my favor because I was just kind of being an asshole. Are you breaking my balls? Well, yes, I was breaking his balls. And so we do need the darkness to some extent, but the problem is that you need to maintain control. And not all of us are very good at this. And none of us can maintain 100% control over ourselves when we're trying to exert this control. And so what I'm seeing and I'm noticing in myself is that if I get too deep into into something, then it'll tend to take over my life to some extent. And I see this happening with 90% of the population. And I don't think it's a new thing. I should do an entire episode on why I think our problems are just old problems with a new coat of paint. But
hence the history repeating itself, right?
Yeah, like everyone's like, whoa, Bitcoin's going to change everything. It's like coins at the first thing changed us just like coins barter to coins changed everything, just like Bitcoin's going to probably change everything now. Or, well, we have communication. It's just like, no, we're just going to do the same things, just faster and on a higher scale. We're still going to be humans about everything. But one thing that's pretty universal about humans is that we have a very limited control and perspective on everything. And so as much as I've broadened my perspective to a massive degree, I still fall victim to a lot of the evils that that our society has to offer. And I think the greatest evil right now is politics. Because we get so now this is only one of the things. You say the darkness, but this can represent any evil. It can represent drugs, I guess. It can represent I don't know, going over the speed limit like it's some kind of honor. It can represent, you know, gambling addiction. It can represent any evil or darkness in your life. But one of the things that I'm noticing is that in a world where we've defined everything as political, everything becomes tainted with that darkness. And this is kind of one of those things that they would tell us in university, is that everything's political. And this is a quote from, everyone says this because it makes it so that they can make anything political. You know, spoon building can be political because political just means, you know, it has elements of politics in it. You know, you play the activist game before you play the spoon making game, that kind of stuff. But you can make anything political, but that doesn't mean everything is political. And so what we're seeing is that you're bringing things into that space of inane conversation that really don't need to be there. Hockey is now putting up banners saying like Black Lives Matter, like the hockey NHL actually gives a shit. But but the thing is, when you say everything's political, you are quoting Joseph Goebbels from 1932 saying, make everything political and then the government can control everything and we can root out the people. Everything becomes part of the state. Everything becomes a part of the political process. Nothing is outside of it so that we can control it. And what ends up
like non-real things too, like morality and virtue and honor and love and things like that
what you love. Well, how you love is filtered through, you know, some racial bias in modern identity politics and Nazi ideology, or it's filtered through the struggle of class warfare if you're a Marxist, or it's filtered through the love you have for the Pope and Jesus if you're if you're taking part in the Reformation Wars. Like, you can make anything political, but that doesn't mean it needs to be political. And what happens is that if you make everything political, people's lives get caught up in stupid stuff, and you start seeing what you do on Facebook, where people start putting forth opinions based on just their own perspective. And wait, isn't that what we're doing here? We do get into politics a lot, but that's
quite a lot. But I think one thing to point out too is that his character, like the way he was as a person, also heavily influenced his writing. So like when he's writing about darkness, a lot of that darkness he's talking about is his own, rejections of society and culture, his experiences with religion, his being rejected by women, and just being a weak, feeble little man for his whole life too. So that really plays a part in tainting his words or his use of
that gives a bit of context to it. But he does see, from what I got, he doesn't actually see women as evil or defenseless, or they have their own ways of going about the world, which is true. And I don't get the sense that he's bitter. I think he's actually recognized his bitterness to some extent. Well, he was a smart man, like that's obvious. But when we bring it to this, what happens is when we engage in this and I'm seeing so much of this nowadays, is that when we engage in something and make it all consuming, a passion of ours, and it's not a healthy thing. Like if you engage in a woodworking project and you're building something and it consumes you, and then all of a sudden you have this thing, it's not this evil thing that you've created. The creation is staring back at you. So what happens is the table that you've built has an element of your design in it. This is a lot how art works. You see the individual in the art to some extent. But when you're engaging in something that has an element of darkness in it, then that definitely does consume you. When you are only paying attention to politics, when you have CNN on all the time, it's just like, well, can't you believe that happened? And CNN's got like 30-hour coverage of 9/11 or something. And we see this, and it eats away at us. It takes us away from ourselves, and we become just a product of that issue. And we lose a lot of our individuality. That's the darkness staring back at us. And what happens is that the issue or the politics of a situation consume us to a point where we can only think about that. Can you believe what this person did? Can you believe what that person did? And, someone detached from it won't see the gravity of the situation because it's not actually that grave. It only seems that grave because you become possessed by this encompassing darkness that seems like it's the most important thing in the world, but it actually isn't. And this is kind of what's happening. I see a lot is too many people are glued to the news, this thing that's literally staring back at them. They're watching it because they want to see what's going on, but then they're being told, can you believe what the Democrats are doing? Can you believe what the Republicans are doing? Rah, 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 rah. Feel bad, feel angry. And it's stoking the darknesses in their own hearts. And instead of pushing for things that they would want in their own lives, they're following the tenets that other people want them to do. Oh no, do this. This is what you need to think is important. This is what you need to think is important. Well, no, what you actually should think is important is your own family and friends and maybe your job, and not really care so much about what matters to a few political sophists, 3,000 kilometers away. And so you
keep it even a little personal too, like those darknesses that we talk about. It's not just necessarily things that we depict usually metaphorically as dark, but I think it's also like the way we approach civil problems or social problems like addictions or whatever. We have a war on drugs. We can't just say like we're going to have safety protocols and needle exchange. We're going to have a war on this evil thing. And it's that riling of people's emotional responses that I think is kind of manipulative. It's a lot like advertising and marketing, where they'll have really loud volume, for instance, on their commercials because that's going to wake people up or grab their attention or shock. But it's annoying. Nobody actually likes that type of thing. But when it's reflected back at you, it's like the jealousy and rage that come from a lover. You know what I mean? So the love is pure, but the rage that comes from it is the darkness that stares back at you.
Yeah,
so
and
just to personalize it a bit.
No, that's right, because you get this element of which can be dispelled by self-awareness to some extent, which is kind of what I was talking about before. You have this monster inside of you, and you have to control it with self-awareness and self-control. And it's the deeper you get into like just a 24-hour CNN stream, the harder it is you're going to be able to keep yourself and not lose yourself to CNN. Like I keep going back to 9/11, where they were pushing, like it was just a constant stream of 9/11 news, and there was maybe a new piece of news every
But that breaking news banner never went away. Even 10 years later, breaking news is still 9/11.
Yeah. And so it becomes this is what's important. This is what's important. Well, what is actually important? You can find, well, it's not that hard. Self-examination can tell you that, well, your job is important. well, your wife is probably important. Your kids are definitely important. Your neighbors are important. The things that matter are those things that definitely have an effect on your life. And when you put effort into them, you get positive results out of them. You get benefit, you get a happiness, and you get prosperity out of them that are not tainted by these things. That's a funny way of saying the things that are important, but it's I think what's being taken advantage of is this: everyone wants to make a difference and everyone wants to actually feel like they're doing something in society, but they're plugging into this cycle of nonsense.
I think it's kind of laziness on people's part too, because it's almost like they want to grab onto that deepity.
Yeah.
They want to grab onto the deepity without actually having to think for themselves or do any of that hard work of being deep. Do you know what I mean? So like, yeah. I love philosophy and I philosophize constantly, as you can probably tell just from our conversations on the channel. I love taking it off to the abstract and figuring out, exactly what makes it tick and fall apart. Mm-hmm. But I think what's the problem with people using these types of quotes is that it's like a mental laziness that satisfies them for having not done anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a reward, just like we talked about in our raising awareness episode.
Oh yeah.
It's like they're self-rewarding and self-gratifying, saying I'm part of a cause that's bigger than me and I'm special and important to the world. But they're not doing anything special or important or thinking anything special or important. They're just grabbing deepity and throwing it in everybody else's faces and saying, pat me on the back for it.
Well, Nietzsche's one of those guys, definitely, that people have, he's right up there on the list of people that are quoted but never read. He's up there with Adam Smith, the Bible.
Mark Twain, especially the Bible.
Karl Marx. The Bible. Like, how many communists have actually read the Communist Manifesto or, Das Kapital? God, I don't want to, it's not even going to go in there. I read parts of it and I'm like, that's good enough.
But Marx is really interesting, even for people who aren't communist, and people who aren't communist don't read Marx either, which is really baffling to me, because everybody claims to know what they're talking about, but nobody actually looks into the things that they're they're teaching. They're trying to teach people things that they never learned.
Right. And so one of the things is that if you get someone that's infinitely quotable, then you can pull out stuff that sounds good. And this is definitely what the main media does, is that they'll just find quotables, but now they're just using Twitter, which is the quotable without anything to back it up. So God is dead. It sounds good if you're like a militant atheist, but then you're missing the point of God is dead. Because the point of God is dead is that, society is weaning themselves off of this, and we've killed God, but now what do we do? And he's kind of like,
it's more like the doctrine, you know what I mean? Like, when he's talking about the institution or the human need, generally speaking, as some sort of like evolutionary construct of our psyche, right? But he's not. Right. He's not declaring it that it's dead, so bury it and cover it up or throw it away. He's declaring that it's dead in the sense that it's not as necessary as it used to be before, when people had no other objective understanding of reality. Before science, you needed God. That was science.
Well, and he was like, we need to start talking about morality subtracted from God, even if that might not be a thing. It's something that we need to start talking about. And he kept bringing up in this one, philosophers of the future and free thinkers and whatnot, and how philosophy needs to be free to do its own thing. But to get back to the conversation, is that it's easy to just take what you want out of context to support whatever inane, juvenile philosophy that you have, that may just be a way of supporting some, moral failing or, character flaw that you have. Instead of dealing with it, you can say, well, it's okay if I'm a jerk to my Christian the people I know who, follow Jesus because, God is stupid anyways. And like, then you quote this and now you're just allowing yourself to be a jerk to them. This is the darkness looking back at you, and it's possessed you now.
That's exactly right. You're feeding into that reflection of the demons and the monsters inside of you that make you less than human, less compassionate, less loving, less trustworthy, less responsible, all those things that matter.
So, and I kind of do want to get in. No, I'll just keep going. And so, like I said, when you get something in the present day, it seems like a lot of people everyone seems to have an opinion on a topic that they know nothing about, and then based on what they were watching on the news, which is quoting something someone said on Twitter. Now, if we look at the medium, then Twitter itself is this thing where you're saying one thing without any recourse to anything else. You're not citing sources. The only content of that source is the quote itself. So if I only had Nietzsche 146 without any other of the lexicon of Nietzsche, then we'd be talking about something someone said once, and there would be no context to it, and there would be no background stuff that we could bring into it. It's literally just those 3 lines of text, making it absolutely meaningless. Words without
context. That's often the problem too with people quoting the Bible, because the Bible is compiled or comprised of separate books. Like the canonized Bible is just a bunch of different texts like bundled together. So to quote one book from the Bible and consider it the entire Bible, or summarily expressing some type of common theme across the entire Bible, is just patently false.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like comparing one dictionary to all the other dictionaries of other languages. Yes, it's a dictionary, but it's different. It's separate.
Well, you can kind of see if you read the Bible how it kind of matures over the course of itself into a more sophisticated construct of its own morality. And it's worth reading in its whole. And go read the apocryphal books. Yeah. They're kind of interesting. I just kind of finished the Book of Enoch for no reason. I just kind of found a copy of it and read it.
The Jubilees is the best. Highly recommended.
So on an aside, are these just Psalms? Anyway, now that I've been canceled by all the Christians.
Well, that's what Psalms were, though. I mean, they were hymns, but hymns are basically written as poetry, and poetry is basically written as aphorisms and concise
maxims.
Yeah, like terse tense.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing is, actually, I brought up cancel stuff, but like cancel culture is definitely and yes, it is real, but I think it is the epitome of what I'm talking about. Instead of just minding your own business, you feel the need to go and affect the life of someone who you didn't hear about before 2 days ago and ruin them for some cause that you're barely involved in out of some need to just wreck stuff. But you're not going to be honest about the fact that you're wrecking stuff. You settle on the greater good.
But they're lying about the motivation too, right?
Well,
like they're telling themselves that they're motivated for good principles, but it's actually like self-righteous indignation that they're just spewing all over the place. Like it's not honest even with themselves. And I think Nietzsche talks a lot about that in the reflective part of that darkness, right? Like actually look at it, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's there.
And so we have what we're ending up with is we have all these darker sorry, I got a hair in my mouth. And okay, I guess I should, it's just cat hair. You own a cat, it's going to happen. If you own a cat, the darkness is in your home and you can do nothing about it. Deal with it, buddy. Self-reflection is not going to help you here. You brought that demon into your home. So what you end up with is you have these mobs, and on various sides, there's more than just two, who hate each other because they're being told to hate each other because, there's no way we can peacefully coexist, say the communists, and they're ruining my this or that, said the I don't know, the guys on the right, who aren't Nazis, they're just jerks. But and then you have the anarchists who are like, I could get along with anyone, but I won't. And so you get this cluster of nonsense, and this, I guess, a cycle of nonsense that keeps getting spouted to make sure everything keeps going, so that everyone keeps watching the news, so everyone keeps getting indignant about stuff that doesn't matter in their lives. And so what do? How do we get rid of this darkness once it's taken hold of us ideologically or done this? Because I've seen this in myself. Like I study this stuff because it's an extension of a lot of what I was studying in history. And I seen this in my people that I went to history class with. And it's easy to get indignant about something. It's fun when it's ancient history, because you can just be like, oh man, I can't believe, they burned down the Library of Alexandria. That was the worst thing damn those Romans. Rah, 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 rah. Like, it's not going to hurt anybody. You're inviting a comic darkness into yourself. And nobody's going to get offended by it. It's not going to hurt anybody. Everyone's just going to laugh, and you can laugh about it and, feel a bit bad. Because wouldn't it be cool to read those, have a full version of Livy, Livy's Ad Urbe Condita, or have all of the, just all these other books that we don't have now. And you can get indignant about that. But I find myself having to dive into some of this stuff, and I'll talk about it, and I'll be mulling this stuff over. What does it mean to be, like, how does Foucault affect modern political structure, blah, 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 blah. And I'll go up and I'll talk to my wife, and she'll be like, I don't care. Stop talking about it. And I find that, like, okay, this doesn't actually matter. I'm getting a little too deep into this. I need to disengage. And I think that's going to be the name of the word today, is disengagement. But to go into it a bit further, I found myself getting unnecessarily angry at things that are happening on the other side of the world. Now, to some extent, we do need to stay appraised of what's going on. Yes, you do need to know. Yes, people are being stupid. Yes, it is annoying, and there are moral outrages out there. But what can you do about it?
Well, I think one thing is, like, you can know about something without getting emotionally charged by it. You know what I mean? And despite all the best efforts of everybody in the media and, like, trying to get views and clicks and, marketing and advertising and sales, like, put all that aside. Everything that you receive as an input from the outside world as some kind of, like, stimulus or any type of input, whether it's the way somebody interacted with you or it's the after effects, the causal effects of something they've done. All of those things don't have to be emotional. Like, we don't have to respond physically and biologically, because we can choose. We can choose to be aware. And self-awareness, as you pointed out, and I think rightly so, is the key component to Nietzsche's writing. The whole point to pointing out our darkness is not to just justify it and say it's part of our nature, oh well, so be it. The point of pointing it out is, hey, we're sentient creatures who can contemplate our own existence existentially. Like, we can affect our affect.
Yeah.
That's with an E and an A. Effect our affect.
And to some extent, I find that is counterintuitive, because even in my own head, I find this is counterintuitive. Because, well, when I go hiking and I go out walking, I find that I lose all these conversations, these debates that are happening in society, and I lose them. They're gone. And it's probably going to end up being accidentally a really good case for libertarianism, but we'll just get there as we go.
Yeah, take it where it leads.
Yeah. But what I end up finding is that when I disengage, I end up realizing how little those things matter, even though they do matter. Oh, they're passing this new bill, blah, 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 blah. And I guess this kind of goes back, I can't remember what episode that was. where we were talking about how, you should engage with things that actually matter in your life and, fight for them tooth and nail. But really, as a Canadian, does Trump's latest stupid speech really matter to you? No.
I think it matters though when there's an insurrection.
Okay, but there's not an insurrection. And there hasn't been since
January?
No, that wasn't an insurrection. That was just a bunch.
Technically, it was.
Technically, and I don't want to get into that. And so I think there was a couple in the 1920s that we could call an insurrection that didn't go anywhere. Well,
I think Louis
1860 wasn't. Yeah, well, in Canada, Louis Riel definitely. In the Fenian raids, no, it was just a bunch of drunk Irishmen.
Beyond me.
Oh, okay. Essentially, American Irish, mad at the British, attacked Canada over the border to get back at Britain so that they could free Ireland.
That sounds like a really funny plot for a movie.
Oh yeah. Somebody, if you're listening, make a comedy movie about the Fenian attacks. It'll be
preferably
great.
John Cleese or Eric Idle.
But the thing is that this stuff doesn't actually, when it matters, you'll know. Now, right now, I'm taking part in, I'm paying attention to lobbying with regard to firearm rights. Why? Well, if you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know why. I own firearms. I would like to maintain my ownership of my property. It's that simple. There's nothing beyond that. It bugs me that people are that the laws don't really have any sense. It bugs me about all these other things, but I still have to go about my life, and I can't just make it my entire life. I can't just go and be talk to everybody I'm talking to about firearm rights. I might get a bit indignant when, the debates start coming up, or when there's a new petition, but I'll generally just deal with it on my own and not try and bring everyone into my debate and get everyone sorted into lines in my life and then just cast everyone out that is on some other side. And so it seems counterintuitive to just be no, this doesn't affect me, because you want to keep informed. And then it seems counterintuitive to say, no, this doesn't affect me because, well, it's the economy. I take part in the economy, blah, 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 blah. It's just disengage unless it affects you. Well, they're changing the curriculum in the school. Disengage. Wait, no, I have kids and that's my school division. I should get involved in that.
But even if you don't, if you end up going to a hospital, somebody's kids are going to be your nurses and doctors. So it still matters to everybody that everybody has some type of some kind of order or structure to civilized society. It's
right.
Just, in order for it to stay consistently ordered, there needs to be some type of rule and regulation, and that means self-rule and self-regulation as well.
Yeah. So you end up now. To me, it's hard to disengage. It is very hard to disengage, because it's oh, I want to know what's going on. And there's that carrot, but the stick's coming. And it always comes. It's not going to not come. And the carrot tastes, it looks great. Oh, I want to learn. Oh, I want to get into it. I want to do this. I want to do that. And sometimes the news is just the news. You can just, which did my team win last night? I wasn't able to watch the game. Nothing wrong with that. There's no monster there. It's actually a benign monster, and I kind of want to talk about that a bit. But the monster of politics is definitely a more real one, because we are dividing ourselves and sometimes killing each other over being way too wrapped up in, which side of the political divide you're on. When and it's letting us paint pictures of people that don't actually exist. I remember going to the Greta rally that was here in the Greta Thunberg rally that was here in Edmonton about 2 years ago now. And what said I was like, I'm a centrist. I'm here to observe because, I'm a historian. I didn't really want to be like, I think she's an idiot, because they'll be like, but she's just a child. It's like, she's 17. Grow up. Like, she knows what she's talking about. And people were like, well, you have to choose. People were telling me over and over, you have to choose sides. You have to choose sides. It's either you're with the oil companies or you're with the environment. And being with the environment meant, destroying the system. Being with the environment meant destroying capitalism. Being with the environment meant renewable energy that
but that's the thing, they're like dictating what it means to you.
Right.
You have like this binary option. Either you agree with all of these preconceptions or you agree with all of these preconceptions. And it's like, you're not allowed to think.
Yeah. And so there's a crowd of people on both sides with two other groups. There was 3 guys with nuclear, like, try nuclear signs who were being constantly yelled at. And then there was people on the right who came in being like, oil, 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 because in all honesty, they seemed like they were having the most fun because they just showed up, chanted oil a bunch, watched the lefties just go, nyeh, and then left.
Yeah, the Socrates of our modern age.
Yeah. Like, they'd just be like, man, I'm just going to drink oil. They just showed up, chanted oil a couple times, watched the Black Bloc kids freak out. And then there were the other group was the police who, what didn't look like, they're not there being stormtroopers smashing on their riot shields. They were there with their bikes and they looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. They looked like the most bored people on the planet. Just like, I can't believe I have to do this. I'm a cop. I'm standing here with my bike.
On that note, I might want to shepherd you then if you'll allow me. Because that's a good point. That's like a good mental image or like a frame of reference to use for the benign darkness. Because on the one hand, depending on which camp you're sitting in, that monster is labeled the guy on the other side of the fence. And each of those parties has guys on the other side of or gals.
Well,
whatever,
it's just like you said.
So like, the monster is fluid. Like, it's a dynamic kind of thought thing. And then they're telling you not to think about it and telling you what it is. But these monsters are completely generated, and like that's the point of a monster. It's a creature that doesn't exist, right?
Right. And you have this because you have your own tenets on your side. This is what we believe here. If you're going to come hang out with us, then you have to abide by these tenets. And if you don't hang out with us, then you are the other, and we're going to paint you with this brush. And so, you're white, therefore you're evil. Everything is identity politics. If you don't believe if you're not drug positive, all drugs are good, drugs being bad. If you're not like super polyamorous, if you don't have, LGBTQ expialidocious things, then, this or that. But like, it doesn't allow for nuance. So we're going to cast you with the other brush, and that the color on the brush changes, but the brush still is painting the monster that they're seeing. And the reason that it doesn't make any sense is because the monster that the left sees doesn't exist. The monster that the right sees mostly doesn't exist. And there aren't any Nazis, and there's nobody even if there's no gay agenda on the other side either. Like, well, except for
they're not trying to make the world gay. That's like the funniest thing that like homophobes are worried about is like, they're gonna convert me. I'm like, well, you're probably already gay then if you're worried about like liking cock.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't help when San Francisco choir starts saying, yes, we are coming for your children. Could you not? But
things like having gay parents, right? Adopting kids. I mean, if we have kids in orphanages, they're definitely better off with a loving gay couple parent than a foster home that they change every year.
Yeah, it's kind of like Warren Farrell's thing. It's like, you're better off with parents than not.
Yeah, exactly. So even if you disagree with them, nothing those parents could do could make that kid gay. Like, their argument to being gay is, I was born like this, I can't change it. So how could they possibly change somebody else, like the child they raise? You know what I mean? Like, their own arguments are just conflicting with because they're not logical about it. They're painting monsters with broad strokes, and there's no fine detail to the
Right.
picture that they're describing.
So what I keep, and I think what I'm trying to get at is that when you got all these things together and you have, when I'm saying this, you're painting all this stuff. It's like, this is what's happening in the world, blah, 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 and you just put the brush down. But what does that even look like? And I think the best way of figuring it out is at the end of Candide, where he says, il faut cultiver notre jardin. And he says, because Candide goes through this in it's Voltaire's book. Voltaire's a hack. Yes,
Just
I'm bringing
to translate for our English only viewers.
Okay,
we need to cultivate our own gardens.
Yeah. So this is the last line of the book, and Candide goes on the adventures. He goes to El Dorado, finds the Fountain of Youth and the City of Riches, and all these things. He takes part in the Lisbon earthquake and the war, and it's like just general wars. He goes all over the world and ends up in the Ottoman Empire, and his wife doesn't have a butt because they ate half of it, and he's been shot at and whipped and wrecks, and just the worst things have happened to him. And he gets in the book, he tries to take care and tries to do the best he can with other people's situations as they go. And his friend Pangloss, his philosopher friend, keeps going, don't worry. Even though all this terrible stuff is happening, it's all for the best, and the best of all possible worlds, which he just keeps saying over and over and over and over again.
French Protagoras.
Yeah. And this like philosophical, theological optimism, it's God made it like this for a reason. This is the best of all possible worlds. And then they end up on a farm in the Ottoman territory, maybe like Bulgaria-ish, and north of Greece or something there. And the troop end up on a farm. They're saying, it's like, oh, can you believe this is happening? The Sultan, blah, 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 and they're going to war with Austria, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, don't care. Not my problem. It's like, well, what's going on? Well, il faut cultiver notre jardin. We need to cultivate our own garden before we fix other people's gardens. That's their problem. It's interesting, but like, really, do we need to get involved in, a border clash between Libya and Egypt? Okay, I just made that up. That's not happening. But
it's different when people are asking for help, right? Like the migrant crisis, for instance. When people show up on somebody's border and the country says we can't absorb all of these migrants or whatever, right? Yeah. That's an instance where people should care, but you don't need to freak out about it. You just need like, oh, that is a human problem and we are all humans. We should all sit down and figure this out together. Mm-hmm. Like there's no need to get angry or frustrated or freak out about it. Like the people who are there are justifiably frustrated. I'm not saying they can't be. But if someone for the came people over who are discussing it and trying to find solutions, mm-hmm. like
yeah, and it's like if they come up like, Jordan, I need the perspective of a Canadian in Alberta on the border crisis in the States, and I'm just going to be like,
yeah, sure,
okay, tell them to fuck off. But like, okay, we might have to censor that. But and everyone would be like, that everyone would be painting with their brushes and they're holding their brushes, to see which side of I'm on, and they'll be like, oh, he's a Republican. It's like, no. Oh, if you're not a Republican, then you must be a Democrat, or maybe you're this or that, or you're a Tea Party person, or it's just like, maybe they should go fix their own country. I don't know. This is not my problem. Why are you asking me? Why are you getting me involved?
Yeah, like, I can have politicians and diplomats for, is to figure this stuff out.
Am running my life, and most of us aren't running our life at maximum capacity. That's just part of being human. And to ask what a country should do about 50,000 people on the border, and while that country sneaks people in the middle of the night and then kicks out a bunch of others, and it's like, you know what? I'm going on vacation because I've got my own problems and I need to worry about those. Je fool.
So what would you say to somebody who
today.
consider that self-centered?
Thank you. Okay, well, you've
Destructively self-centered, I mean.
destructively. How would that be destructive?
Well, ignorance and neglect are forms of abuse, so.
Yeah, but ignorance is, I'm ignorant of 99.99% of humans, and I can't not be.
But being approached with something and faced with a problem and then pushing it away saying it's not my problem, that's deliberate. That's not the same thing as just not knowing. It's choosing not to know.
It's circumstantial. If it isn't my problem, like the border crisis, then it's just like, whatever. But if I'm a border services, if I'm leader of a section of the border in the border services or in something like that, organization, whatever organization, they have so many organizations down there, then if someone asks me my opinion and I don't have one, well, first of all, I'd probably say no comment, go away from me, I'm at work.
That would be the responsible thing, yeah.
That would be the responsible thing. But if I don't actually have a modus operandi for how to deal with it, then that would be irresponsible. It's a matter of what is important to that individual. What is the migrant crisis, plant in my garden? No. But just because something's not in my garden doesn't mean it's like, oh, I don't have any marigolds in my garden. That doesn't mean I can't appreciate them. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be watering a part of my garden for marigolds when I don't have any. So I need to pay attention to my dill. I need to pay attention to my snapdragons. I need to pay attention to my rosebush. But I'm not going to be putting much mind onto marigolds. And it's the same with issues. I need to put the effort in where I am. But there's like 15 billion of these things going on in our world. Like, what do you want to, like, where are you going to put all your, I can't say this word, your F's, your fricks? Where are you going to put all of them? Are you going to stick them into Crimea? Are you going to put them on the Chinese-Indian border crisis? Are you going to wonder what's happening in the South China Sea? Are you going to be worried about the Indian farmers? Are you going to be worried about trade deals to Saudi Arabia? Which, like, you can't care about all of them at once. You can form opinions when you sit down and think. But the problem is that we're not sitting down to think about a lot of these. And you do need to sit down and take, like, if you want to actually come up with a valid opinion, you need to put more than like 5 seconds of thought into it. And we're not doing that. And so we're all taking all these things and we're casting them with these simplistic brushes, and then without actually dealing with them. And I think a lot of times when we have to make an opinion on that, we'll just settle on virtue signaling. Oh no, those poor people. Just generally in any issue, those poor people, whatever time you can say, those poor people is the one we'll gravitate towards. But it's okay to just say, I don't know, man, that sounds like it sucks. And
yeah,
then
it makes sense though to me in cases where, like, legit you don't have an opinion or any hand at actually fixing the problem. Like,
right,
totally understand that. But like, for the people who can actually appreciate all of the problems of the world all at the same time and who do want to be involved, I think for those people, what they're not recognizing is that other people can't. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
if I have this infinite capacity to feel like the pain of every human being on Earth, and I'm deeply involved in every single crisis, whether it's a border or racial issue or rights or whatever like that, if I'm one of those types of people, I think those types of people would do best to not expect that type of appreciation or involvement from everybody else, because that's not really fair. So like, as another example, if you step back and say that's not my problem because I can't deal with it, or I have no hand in this game, I can't affect the outcome, I can't do anything about it.
Glorified no comment.
Or if you have no comment, that's a legit response. That's like the point of abstaining in a vote too, is to abstain if you don't want to choose one side or the other. And nobody abstains in the elections, which they should. Instead of not voting, you should go to the booth and abstain, because then you're actually saying with your vote, hey, you guys are awful candidates. There's an opportunity for a third party here. But if you just don't vote, third parties have no idea how much support they would get if they did run.
Yeah, none of you get my vote. And like it counts as a and I think I've done that actually before. I think I did that. Actually, I have a policy of not telling anybody how I voted, so I'm not going to tell you when I did that. Which is why I don't tell anybody. I secret ballot is one of those sacred things I feel is sacred. So I have this policy of just never telling anybody how I voted, because that's part of how democracy works. And having signs out on your front yard is just, if that's actually one of those things where it's just like, I want everyone to vote for the way I vote. And I try and resist that. And it's hard because it's just like, I want to influence people to my perspective. I want people to see what I know is right. And that's that hubris that we have about our own perspective. And
I'm a democratic idealist. I want everybody to vote on their own opinions, and I want them all to have their own opinions. So I try not to tell people how I will vote because I don't want to influence their votes. I want a democratic system in the idealist sense, which is impossible, but I can try.
Yeah, and I do feel that urge to put a sign up to be like, oh, you should vote for this, I feel like these people would actually better further the democratic ideals, but no, I resist that and I do it. Now you brought up one thing that I want to actually get into, is that other people can't see it like you do. And this is, so if you're actually into it, so imagine you're I don't know, you're building a hydroelectric dam, something as non-political as I can make it. I'm sure you can make anything political. You're wearing those shoes. Did you know that those are made out of slaves from Mars or something? I don't know. And but you're building a hydroelectric dam and you're in charge of the project. Now, if anyone talks up to you, now you're embedded in it and like you are controlling, the monster has taken over your life. The monster of building a hydroelectric dam, this big project. And you are unleashing the monster of your work out to such an extent that it is controlling your life. The monster it's not a bad one. It's like, but it is controlling your life for that time until the project is done. And if someone comes up to you and asks you, hey man, how's it going? Have you heard this new song that's coming out? And all you want to talk about is the project. All you want to talk about is water flow things, because it's the only thing on your mind. It's taken over your life. It's absorbed you. And this happens, like we're talking politics, but this happens with anything. If you talk to anybody at the university who's doing their own research, chances are they're going to wiggle the conversation towards their research. I remember one guy kept
actively fight myself not to, because I'm like, Kris, people don't care about cross products of matrices.
Right. I remember there was this one guy who he was really interesting research at the U of M, and he was interested in like debt, like historical debt and how people did debt and what people were doing with debt and like individuals' debt and how it affected their lives. And he would talk about debt constantly. He would always bring it up. He'd be telling you all about it and it'd be like, cool, I don't actually care. And you'd have to like kind of disengage because you wouldn't want to get involved because you just didn't care. And I would do the same thing. It's like, I remember a couple of mine where I was looking at York Factory records and I just wanted to tell everybody about the York Factory records. And you have this inherent thing in science and in research, I guess, where if you discover something, you want to share it. This is why that idea of like the scientist hiding stuff from the world because they're not ready for it, that's never happens, because everyone in their own thing wants to share everything with everybody. We're very social creatures. So this tendency exists in the political world too. Yeah, it's okay if the monster's taking you over and you're writing a book about like, flower planting or carpentry. It's like, ooh, that monster's really going to destroy you. Well, it could if you let it, but most people will be like, yeah, dude, that's just carpentry. We're here eating pizza.
But I think it's more to suggest the monster can be created from anything that is good. Do you know what I mean? So well, like even it's not just morality or things that become evil. It's also our approaches to things, and our willful neglect of things is also a monster. It's a type of abuse to neglect people in need when you have the power and control to help them. So I would suggest that it's probably the contrarian argument to the one that you're making would be to say the monster in us is our ignorance and apathy. our not caring about other people is the problem that we're not addressing reflective.
Maybe.
Do you know what I mean? Staring into that darkness, staring back.
I don't know if it has to do, I don't think it's something so morally succinct with like not caring about people, but I think it's just that anything that we do can turn to evil. Anything at all. Evil is something that you do that's corrupted. And I think Nietzsche even talked about this, which essentially was, the road to hell is paved with here we go. I've just found it randomly. Oh, look at that. One is punished most for one's virtues. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You can intend to do good things, but what that also means is that evil comes out of good things. There's no abstract evil. There's no devil. The devil lies with they call him the Prince of Lies in Christianity. Well, why? Because he'll get you to do things for the right reasons, the wrong things for the right reasons. And so you can corrupt anything. Anything can become evil. You can have you can become addicted to anything. You can let something take over your life and ignore your family.
Well, like
it's not just about
parents. You can overparent and cause problems with your kids.
Yeah, that's a great example of
both ways.
Something good being corrupted is that, and you can help too much. There's always that one kid who hasn't figured it out yet on the playground who's just like, oh, let me help you up. It's like, get the heck out of here. And so I remember whenever I fell, I always found this to be an evil. Whenever I would slip on ice in the winter and just kind of stumble and people be like, are you okay? It's like, did I hit the ground? It's like, could you not? And I always found that so annoying. And this just brings out the evil in me because just leave me alone. And so
from a gesture of compassion.
Yeah. Oh no. Gestures of compassion often just rise my ire. So
yeah, people patting you on the back. Oh, good for you. And you're like, you know what? That's the worst thing you can possibly say. And it's meant as a kind thing, but the darkness or the monster inside of us is so vindictive and suspicious of people's duplicity.
But at the same time, there's altruism in it. We've seen altruism in itself become its own evil. And so
Haiti, the aid that was given to Haiti and extorted or
yeah. Well, that's a little more that's a little more conscious. But
I'm sure they had good intentions when they raised the money.
Well, there's a lot of
had the money and spent it. They kind of changed their
charities are a good example of this. So you get a lot of people charities that oh, we're gonna do this, it's gonna be so good, and then everyone gets to pat themselves on the back for doing great, but then only 5% of the money goes to actually helping the homeless people. And so you can feel like you're actually helping the homeless, but you're not. And so you stop short of actually doing the good deed. And so there's darkness there. You're so caught up in helping the homeless that you don't actually help the homeless. But that's not really where I want to take it, because
it's sort of similar to the biblical piety, though, those self-righteous, pious people who say you should follow Christ like me because, I'm a better person for it and that kind of thing. It's creating a monster out of something good.
Yeah. That's why a lot of people hate Christianity, because they see a lot of those people and they see the people trying to help them for the wrong reasons, or they see people trying to help them with strings attached. When Christianity is really kind of this benign thing nowadays, they don't really crusade anymore.
But it always was benign. It was just farmers and homesteaders and serfs and you know what I mean? Most people didn't do anything with their religion.
Yeah.
Most people didn't do anything until it was politicized and turned into an army.
Yeah. And so you could say, you got that St. Francis of Assisi, just rejecting the Pope, saying it's just you're dumb. You don't need to have all that opulence. The construct of the Vatican itself is an evil entity. Although there are some Catholics right now that are actually reforming it in an interesting way, but still the fact that you need this political construct that's vying for dominance with the Holy Roman Emperor over who's got control of humanity in Europe, it's like, ugh, maybe you're missing the mark of what Jesus was hoping for. But
Yeah, like Jesus never said you need to endorse kings to help them with their power and their future campaigns.
well, and this is kind
they
of
did
what
in England and stuff, in Ireland or whatever. They needed the sanction or the blessings of the church in order to establish or maintain the establishment of order and power in their countries.
Well, and this is what like Francis of Assisi was kind of doing, is he was kind of disengaging. He's saying, this is corrupt, that's corrupt, everything here is corrupt. I'm gonna go talk to birds. And so he sold all his stuff. He was actually like this rich guy, and he sold all his stuff and bought some potato sacks and went and lived in the bush, and rejected all that and became very holy, as the story goes. He was a real guy, but that's definitely, I guess, an example of disengagement. But I guess the counter to this is you can disengage too far. And this is, again, if we go look to Christianity, you get the ascetics in the early Christian church, the hermits who'd go off into the desert. But then it became a bit of a meme, and the desert ends up full of hermits and ascetics. And you get a bunch of these holy men who are going off and living on it because that's what it seems to be the thing to do, instead of actually just, I'm rejecting the world because, this is holier. It's like, no, I'm rejecting the world because it's not conducive to me living a moral and holy life. And so I need to stop dealing with the church's nonsense, and I'm just going to go off and be a hermit for a while and talk to birds. But I guess this comes down to intention. And now Nietzsche definitely was like, fa to your intention. So the action itself is the action. Doesn't matter what you intended. The result is important. But the intention does matter to some extent. And so what that means for us is that you can go off into the bush for a month or two and disengage and, come back refreshed, not having any of that. You cast off that, psychological baggage of like, these people or that people or this or that, or there was a shooting in this church in some synagogue in Western Russia or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Just that's terrible. And it just kind of washes off of you like water off of a duck's back. You come back and you see what matters in life. But if you reject life entirely, if you reject your responsibilities entirely, it's just as corrupted as going too far into the darkness, which we see in people that have rejected, have surrendered already to life. It's like, oh, it's too hard, I'm not going to do it. You get this with like kids who are failing to launch from their parents' house, or
I get the sense of that though with people's disengagement is because it's so much easier than actually engaging. That's the risk that we run.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of why I would say I'd rather people care too much and do nothing than not care at all and just get on with their lives. Because not caring at all, I think, just personally, it's not like I can prove it or anything, but personally, in my opinion, I think when people don't know about things, they don't know how bad they are, they can't gauge how much energy they should devote to it. They can't adequately calculate without the variables needed to calculate. You know what I mean?
So no, I agree. And that's kind of a better way of saying what I wanted to say. And my I guess my advice would be like, turn the news off. If something is important and something that will affect your life, the news will make it to you in one way or another. We live in a society that's kind of lost all meaning now. We live in a society. But if something does in fact impact your life, the news will get to you. It's not like you're going to miss an election. You have to be pretty disengaged to miss an election. And during the election cycle, you should actually look and see what the things are. But actually, the news is probably the worst way to do this. How do I figure it out? Who do I vote for? Go and talk to them. Like, you can't go and talk to the future prime minister, but all your local people, school trustees, all of them, they all have offices. You can just walk in and sit down and be like, what are you guys doing? Which you can do. And that's a better engagement than, watching the news where you're just, it's like, instead of actually engaging, let's look into the darkness because that's all that the news is. And to a great extent right now, the mainstream media is literally just feeding this division. So you need to make your life up on your own and come to decisions on your own, free from a lot of that thing. Because, and I'm saying disengage from that because a lot of what's coming at you, you think you can control it. You think you can master it. Oh, I can maintain my unbiased attitude towards this in the face of this. I can master the devil, which is the greatest conceit and the greatest hubris that you can probably have. And you can't. I can't, because I pride myself on my self-awareness, but I lose myself in it sometimes. If you watch this stuff too much, you'll start just ranting and raving about stuff. And I do the same thing. And so there's a middle ground here. And the middle ground is do it yourself. Do your own research. If it actually matters to you, you can do your own research, but you can't research everything. And so, I think that's it.
And if to me too, like if the news is constantly pumping out garbage that you have to disengage from, that might be a sign or a signal that you need to engage in hounding your news media. So like if the media is constantly bombarding you with just like fear mongering and scare tactics and tear jerkers and riling up emotions or whatever, if the media is doing that, that's not their function. Their function is to be boring and just purvey news, to give information and disseminate it to the population at large.
Counterpoint was like Moreau, the famous good night and good luck guy. He wasn't boring. He was engaging because he would actually talk about the issues, and they replaced him with, howdy doody.
But I think even in that case, even though it helped people engage one-on-one, like to be interested in his subject matter, I think it's distracting in the sense that the way that it does it, the method of approach, is to inspire emotional responses to people. And I think even though it's like getting kids to learn something, right? You want to make it fun. No problem with that whatsoever. You want people to engage. But once you're an adult and things matter and they're important, the last thing you want to do is string people along as if they're children and infantilize them.
Well, imagine if Sesame Street was like, it's the letter H, yay, and it's the letter F, hate the letter F. And then everyone in the home is just like,
My issue with the news, though, is like certain things that we know and agree with, we have to hear over and over and over again. And they're doing it just to make people angry or to make people fight. So it's like if somebody was trying to tell me bake a cake, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'm gonna put it in the oven, I've got everything mixed, I'm gonna bake this cake. While it's baking, you don't need to keep telling me to bake the cake. Like, it's there. Like, we're looking for these lost kids or these missing women or these. We're investigating it. Like,
well, it's kind of like,
we don't need to hear about the exact same story every minute of every day.
Remember the miners?
Other news.
The miners down in the mine. They're stuck in the mine, and everyone, and then like you just keep getting like they're still down there. What's happening?
Hourly notices, and
it's like tell me when. Like, I'll learn about it when they get out, a day after they get out, because like too many cooks in the kitchen, buddy.
Yeah, we all agree. Let's go save them. Like, for sure. But there's no conflict, there's no added information, there's no extra benefit. All they're doing is telling the individual plot lines of each person who had a job there that went in, because that's how we get emotionally attached to things. Well, and I think that type of informing people, it inspires this type of disinterest or misinformation, or it gives people like the news media themselves. It gives them access to manipulate people because you're using emotion rather than information.
Well, my favorite example of this was when I was over at, I think it was like Christmas dinner, or it was like Thanksgiving, or it was some dinner at my in-laws' place, and all the grandparents were there, and the grandparents have maybe 5 years of elementary school between them, and which, you know, they're great people, but they're sitting down and the news is on, and the news goes, there's gonna be a trade war, and I'm just kind of like, oh, it's dumb, and that's like dumb, and they're gonna be like, and they're like, whoa, it's just a trade war, and they kind of look at us because they know we're educated, and we're like, this doesn't mean anything. It's like there's like capitalism is literally always a trade war.
Yeah, that's what like, prices are, a conflict between supply and demand.
Yeah, like that doesn't mean anything. They're just trying to get you scared for some reason, or like they're just trying to rile you up, so like with like big numbers and big words that say, you know, you could lose, be fearful of the future. It's like, I refuse to be fearful of the future unless something actually comes and gets me.
But like, that type of thing does get harmful, and that's sort of why I object to it, because things like shock and awe, like the response to 9/11, when they got people to endorse the idea and openly and proudly televise themselves saying, let's just kill them all. Like that type of thinking and promotion of hatred and destruction is the opposite of informing people.
Yeah,
literally the opposite. Is
the news was like people. Anti, like they look at him say this, you know, look at his mission accomplished thing. Look at this. It's like, yeah, but you guys aren't actually against this. And so,
but even the people we disagree with, like we never quote the Taliban. Like we never hear it from them. We always like
Taliban all the time, you know, Allah Akbar.
Yeah. But you always hear a reporter paraphrase something that was translated from somebody else from a conversation had with somebody else. Yeah. That's not information. And it would make sense if the news said, here, this is what we're hearing from these other people, take it with a grain of salt or whatever. But what they're doing is promoting this as if their narrative is just some truth, some abstract, or not abstract, abject reality truth. Mm-hmm. And that there's no equivocating on the meaning or the interpretation behind it. And I think that's what's being missed. That's part of that monster, the demon that we're creating as a culture. Mm-hmm. We're fabricating these monsters out of people who aren't us.
Well, and that truth,
and then we're okay with going to kill them.
Yeah, and then the truth gets backed up with some abject morality, which is absolutely insane, because the whole point of the news, you know, we have this news outlet that says, you know, was it the Times? The sun shines, the truth is like the sun or something, or the truth acts like a metaphor and shows, I don't remember it, but I'm sure someone in the comments can be like, oh, you know it, don't you? But
it always depicts us as the heroes or the good guys. And that type of thinking is destructive in the sense that it discourages people from even questioning their own beliefs.
Right. So if you don't like the whole idea, sorry, you're right. The news itself presents us with something and we're supposed to be able to make the decision. But right now, like you're saying, it's presenting us with the perspective. And then if you don't believe it, you're immoral for some reason.
Or you're a socialist that's going to corrupt the country, or you're a Taliban terrorist, or
you're a homophobe.
They just make up demons to label and classify people.
I really want to meet someone that's actually homophobic. It's like
somebody who's scared.
It's like, you know, I'm not against gay people. I just have an unnatural fear of homosexuality. Yeah. Why? That's a sentence that's going to be taken out of context right there if I ever.
Oh, I'm definitely going to quote you on that one day. See, I got a video of him.
Yeah, just to have a gay guy walking, just.
But that's the type of disinformation again that's harmful. Like I could mischaracterize you like crazy, and you could do the same to me just by quoting one sentence from our entire podcast and losing context.
Right.
If we translate it wrong, right? Like that il faut cultiver nos jardins or whatever. If we consider our garden as all of people on the earth, that could be transposed into the green argument too.
Yeah, but there's going to be a lot of fallow fields.
But it's not even a bastardization, because for all we know, that was the intention of the original quote, was to have that abstract juxtaposition between looking after ourselves in order to look after the planet. It's also like looking after the planet in order to look after the future of our species.
Well, that's what a lot of people concept. That's why I kind of say, and this is what That's why I kind of say I'm accidentally making a libertarian argument.
Yeah,
I'm accidentally making
but that's what makes literature brilliant, is those types of interpretations, right? And that's what made Nietzsche brilliant too, was those types of interpretation. So getting back to the quote and people misusing quotes and wrongfully engaging, we'll say.
Yeah.
I would conjecture that that's a type of, as you put it too, like it's an oversimplification of an idea that was meant to be taken in more than one way. It was never meant to be taken as a literal doctrine, like follow this rule.
And I guess it can be that with the quote, I guess you really only have a problem if your son starts saying stuff like, I am the darkness, though. That kind of stuff.
But that opens the conversation to say, but aren't we all? Like,
aren't we all darkness?
Let's share our darkness. My darkness can lighten yours. Like,
so,
there's all kinds of platitudes you can serve about it. But the point is, it's supposed to get people to think about something specific that would otherwise have gone unaddressed or just overlooked. That's
kind of why I've been thinking about this, because I've been thinking about this for a while. And I know it sounds simplistic when I bring it up like this, but that's kind of been in my head ever since we started the podcast, is like this one quote, because it just gets brought up so much. And, you see it come up on a Call of Duty screen for some reason, because it just sounds cool. I think it has been in a couple of video games, but it's definitely brought me down a certain path of thought that has led me here. And I think it was worth talking about, because I have noticed this in myself and I didn't like it. I didn't like how I was getting too engaged in things that really didn't matter. And the problem with it further was that I couldn't tell whether or not what I was seeing was just the kookiness, or like, the kooks, the ones on the outliers, the ones that are just saying shit, or the actual reality. And so I had to step back. And that's one of the things why I preach disengagement here, is that you need to step back and be able to see it from a different perspective, is not stop staring into the darkness for 10 seconds and look at around you and see what's going on. Because, well, this happens with and we talked about this all the time. Like, you come back to a project after 3 days of not thinking about it with a fresh perspective and seeing what's important about the project, and all of a sudden you're more productive than you were when you dropped it for a couple days. Like, that's why lunch breaks are important too, stuff like that. And so
I think that's a big part of what I was trying to get at, but maybe not articulating it as well as you.
Well, that's why we're having these conversations.
Yeah. But I mean, I was trying to get at that in another episode with our relative scopes, where I was talking about like abstract layers and like focusing in on different scales of reality at the same time to get different perspectives of the same thing. I think I had related it to markets, because that's the first thing that pops into my head, where you look at a long time frame, see what the direction looks like in the trend, and then you look at a shorter time frame, see what that chart looks like, and then the dailies. But what I'm getting to, though, with where you're going here with the whole Nietzsche, but not just Nietzsche, but disengagement or engagement, like the pathological type.
Right.
I think it's really, really important that we bring this up like in many different contexts, because that's what helps us understand the idea and the concept itself of disengagement. So it's not to take you literally to say don't care about anything. That's how a lot of people take Nietzsche, and obviously that's wrong. But it's to say that looking into the darkness, your eyes will adjust to it, and then that's all you'll see.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Well, and final example that I kind of wanted to get into was sports. Now, I'm an advocate for sports for a ton of reasons, but one thing I've noticed with sports is that some guys will get a little too into it. I remember my first hockey game that I ever went to in 1989. It was like the Jets versus the Canadian national team. It was like an exhibition game. And there was a guy we were sitting beside that was just yelling, "Oh, I can't believe you did that. No, man, Howard Chuck needs to be traded. I can't believe old Chick doesn't know how to pass the puck. Who even is in net?" He's just like going off. I'm like 5 at the time. And you get involved in it. And now we can talk about like border crisis and this, but I think sports is one of those places where people can get a little, it shows more because sports doesn't really matter. And that's part of the whole point. We put all our gladiators in an arena and we make them stab each other with points, and
just to see what they can do.
Well, we want to see this, and sports is very important because we want examples of we want examples of excellence, and we want to see it, that martial excellence that humanity is so evolved to, strive towards, and we do it in a very healthy manner with a hockey puck and with a football and a soccer ball instead of killing each other. This is a good way. This is a good place for those tendencies to go, for that dirty nationalism that we used to have to go, because it's a lot easier to be like, yeah, my team's the Jets and I cheer for them rather than anything else. And so I can take my unhealthy nationalist tendencies and put them there. We all do. Every single one of us does it, unless we don't like sports. And so when it becomes unhealthy is when, it matters to you that the other team, when you can't say something like, my team was terrible last night. When you can't say that, that's usually a good sign that you are too invested in it and you need to disengage from it a bit. I've seen this in a lot of people where they'll, the other team sucked, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe they beat my team and now I can't cheer for them. It's like, who cares? It is more fun to watch your team, yes, but that doesn't mean that the other team is evil. And that usually says something about the person who is casting the other team as like devil incarnate than it does about, the actual play of the team, because, something else is wrong there. And maybe you should do some self-reflection to figure that out.
And if I may, I might take that to another, I'll take that same angle, but relate it to another approach in case that helps. It's like with religious fervor, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
If a person is contrarian to religion, a lot of people might ascribe them to have some type of belief or motivation that is anti-religion, that wants to actually end it or close it or stop it or forbid it. But somebody could just be pro-humanist. They could just really believe in the good nature of human beings as an animal or a creature, intrinsic to their own biology, without all the metaphysics attached to it. Mm-hmm. And that would be a really positive thing. Like, you're going around trying to uplift people, help out your neighbors, doing all the same thing that the Christians preach. But and I'm not saying just Christians, I'm just using it as an example. But somebody could take that and twist the perspective based on the way the information was presented to them and consider them anti-Muslim, for example. We hear that all the time in the news these days, that there are people out there who are anti-Muslim or Islamophobic or blah, 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 right? But just because somebody is against the political practices of people manipulating a religion does not then equate to all people believing in this religion ascribed to the political motivations that are being undertaken that we object to, right?
Well, then you can take that, a lot of people will take that further, Muslims are bad. And it's not because Muslims are bad, it's because all religion is bad. And it's not, religion is bad because faith is useless. It's like, okay, tell me how far you get without faith.
But that's what I mean. People are considering that type of understanding or that type of belief system, they just assume it to be if somebody is anti-Christian or anti-Muslim or something like that. But you can actually be anti-religion and pro-human. You could just believe strongly for a positive thing that you both agree on, ignoring the metaphysics and following all the same rules and doctrine, except not explicitly, just implicitly, and still be labeled as an anti-religious person. But that's not what anti means. It's like anti-social and asocial are two different things.
Yeah.
An antisocial person actively seeks to harm other people. An asocial person withdraws. They're reclusive. They just pull back because they don't care.
A-religious is a new category, or non-religious, because it's kind of easier to say.
Yeah.
And it's hard to quantify because it's just like, well, what do you think about, the debates around God? And a lot of people will be like,
But it's like you were
which
saying,
is a valid response
that people can just put onto other people, or like we were talking before about the Greta Thunberg rally. You're either with us or against us. You're with the planet or you're with big oil. And it's like, no, you don't get to define things for me and get me to choose one of two things.
Yeah.
Like, we need to keep reminding people that they have to think for themselves. And everybody says, oh yeah, it's good to think for yourself, of course, because that's a smart thing to say. But actually think about what that means. That means you have to form an opinion, not just grab one that's closest or that's nearest to you, or because you see a bunch of signs on the yards of your neighbors. So it's like convenient socially just to agree with people. Yeah. That's not forming your own opinion. That's not being informed. And those same people are the ones thinking that they're smart enough they can teach other people. They're the idiots like us going on, YouTube or whatever that are preaching their belief. But the difference is we do it here saying this is our opinions and we're trying to figure out some new stuff. Like, the platform is intended to demonstrate that we're still working through it. We're not up here preaching on a pedestal saying we figured it all out. You just have to listen to our podcast and we're done.
Well, that's why that's why I like this medium, because like when I'm lambasting the mainstream media, I'm coming at it from a place of like, it's not because it's like, well, they're all lying to me. I don't like what they're telling me. Now, I think it's ironic that quote that I was trying to find was the Washington Post, and they say democracy dies in darkness. Well, you're the one killing it then. Deepity. But, because the metaphor is that the truth acts as kind of you can see things now. It's an enlightenment, but now you're just lying to everybody. And this new medium that we have, and I think we've talked about this before, where, but this new medium that we have allows us to get to the truth. It allows us to actually input ambiguity, our own ambiguity, into the conversation. We don't just have a 30-second soundbite going like, I know this is what's happening, like up to the minute facts. And like, here's us being like, what do we know for sure? And then you'll be like, I don't know. And I'll be like, I don't know, but it's kind of like this. And then
let's pick it apart. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think?
And we can actually do it. And then people can go through this and come up with their own.
The other thing about this medium too is we're putting our money where our mouth is, right? For every time we criticize the media, we're creating media that we're considering better. We're saying like, this is how you should do it. Not just telling you what to do like Greta Thunberg does. We're actively doing it and saying you should do it more like this. Yeah. And if we're wrong, prove it.
Well, and then we put our faces on it. So it forces us to be a little more responsible. Yeah. We can't just, and I kind of think that like, if you don't put your face on something, you're allowing yourself to become more of a monster.
Well, I'm kind of cheating though, because I published a rap album and a book already, so my character's already been assassinated before I got on here. You're the only one with anything to lose.
Yeah, this is my public seppuku. So
my ritual suicide.
Yeah,
every Tuesday, baby. Friday, I should say. So
this comes out on Fridays. But I don't know, but the whole thing is that we're thinking for ourselves, and we're not saying that we're right. We're showing the logic to say this is kind of why I think we might be right. And that does help. And it alleviates that monster, because, we're not just throwing something at the wall and being like, this has to be nuanced. You can't have the monster in a nuanced conversation where you're actually talking about the facts. It can be there. You get podcasts like this where they sit around and discuss why white people are racist or something, or why we need a communist revolution. You can talk about anything for an hour and a half, but we're trying to be a little blunt here, and I think it helps that we're not on the same side of the political spectrum.
I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, because we keep each other in check and like, that's stupid. Oh no, that's not right. Or, we have to
Kris,
actually
your bleeding heart's making a mess all over the floor.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And so we have to think about what we say before we're just like, if we were both in the same thing, we'd have this echo chamber where we'd be like, oh, damn libtards or something. I don't know.
That is so much of all media. You know what I mean? Like every newspaper, they don't just have a slight bent now. Like they used to just be slightly bent. The Globe and Mail was slightly left and the Post was slightly right. Now they've just gone full board, double down, and everybody knows their readership. They've got all the data of like every YouTube and Google search these people ever make. Like the data collection that goes into aggregated statistics towards readership and volumes of like clicks and views, I think is destroying media. Because that unknown is what makes you have to diversify your thought just to see what type of readers are interested in your material, right?
This isn't actually the first time we're seeing this either. And now what's happening is you get the newspaper for a while was printing for everyone. Now, everyone knew the political bent of the Times or the Post or the Sun. They all picked at a certain part of the political spectrum. The thing was is that you've posted you bought all of them every day. You didn't just buy one of them. If you were actually interested in what was going on, you bought, 3 papers. And so
or like the Free Press Monday to Friday, and then you get like the Post on the weekend or something like that.
Yeah.
You mix it up.
And now I can't even read I read the Post, which is surprisingly centrist, but they'll just talk on everything. But the Globe and Mail, I can't even read. They won't let me in. I'm not going to buy it just so I can be like, oh yeah, I've read all of them. But no. And so, but what happens is they are writing for, and especially the like the Free Press and the Sun types are the lower end papers definitely are doing this a lot more, but they're writing for a certain audience that they think the audience is. And that's in turn creating that own audience.
And that's what scares me, is because it's that monster eating itself.
Right.
It just makes a bigger monster.
Right. And this is why I'm saying, like, if we just, like, I tell, like, when that whole trade war anecdote that I was talking about, I literally just said, don't watch the news. Like, don't watch CTV, don't watch Global, don't watch any of that stuff. They're all saying the same thing from a different perspective, and just turn it off and talk to your family or something. But what's happening is that this is not new. We had this in the 19th century when all the print media was coming up. And I did an entire paper on the draft riots during the American Civil War in New York, where they were putting out a new draft after the battles of Gettysburg, and the Irish in New York rioted. They didn't want to go to war to fight for, black people's freedom when they were the underclass of New York themselves. They weren't doing themselves any favors, but essentially they rioted for 2-3 days, and it was the biggest riot in American history. And by a pretty wide margin, actually. That was a huge just kerfuffle. But the thing was is that I was
down Harlem.
They burned down a lot. I think I have to look at it again. It's been a couple of years.
But I was just tangent.
They called in the army, and the army fought battles against the Irish gangs. And the 5 Points took it pretty hard. But it was pretty brutal. But what happened was the newspapers were definitely involved, and they were stoking all the sides, saying, "Oh, they just caught the copperheads and the carpetbaggers. They're all doing this. Everyone's got their little names for everyone on the other side. People who are what do you call it? They sympathize with the South. Those people are, no one likes them. Or people who are, the Irish, or they're for the Irish, or they're against conscription. That must mean they're against the war. Or they're very pro conscription and very pro the war. And, there's all these groups, and each paper is representing a point in this. And so what I did was I went and looked through all of the papers, and actually read all the papers to see what was going on, to get a sense of the draft riots from kind of the public press perspectives. And you get like Horace Greeley being like, "Oh, the poor plight of the blah, 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 blah." And this just very much like what we were dealing with nowadays. And, the press is stoking the division to sell papers. The problem is that the Irish went and attacked a couple, I think it was the Times building, and they fought. The guy at the Times knew that there was a riot coming. So he got like armaments, and he was on top of the Times building with a Gatling gun, just firing into the crowd because they were going to burn down his paper. And so it's that big of a riot. And
to me, that's the bigger risk, because with the news and the press, they're not going to report on their own ineptitude, right?
Right.
That used to be obvious and self-evident. You used to be able to buy a paper knowing outright what their penchant was, if they were trying to be centrist or trying to be right or trying to be left. No problem if you're going to be open and overt about it, right? But right now, what we have in our media is, because everybody's chasing any views they can get, it's fluid. There's no consistency to it. There's no brand loyalty, and it's discreet and subtle. So they're not even publicizing their penchants, their penchant.
Well, then they don't even talk about stuff that's happening. Like, how much does anybody know about those autonomous zones in Seattle and Minneapolis? Those are still there. Like, and there's still like people dying there, and EMT crews are still not going anywhere near those. And like, why is that happening? That's just being swept under the rug. And so, but then everyone's talking about, the latest celebrity or whatever, it's kind of, that's just kind of historical, like look at the monkey kind of stuff. But they were not reporting on it because, they don't want to have that conversation. But the whole point of the news media is to present what's going on and force and like say, this is what's going on in society, have that conversation. But nobody wants to get canceled. No one, like me.
And so here's the thing, and you're going to hate this. You're going to absolutely hate this. But all of that was the case for Twitter. When you have the Associated Press, or like Al Jazeera and the Free Press and the Sun and the Globe all on one feed, and all you get is the headline and a link towards the whole article, you can weed through all the garbage without actually having to see it pop up. And you get global perspective, first of all, and you get the writers. So all the journalists and the people who write news content, you can subscribe and follow them too. So there is now a way to get that type of brand loyalty with the explicitness that's been lost.
Right.
But the problem is people aren't using it for that.
No,
but we do have a tool. We do have a solution. We're just not using it.
The medium, and that's everyone's like, oh, they're not using it's like you make a new hammer and then everyone uses it as a bottle opener. It's like, you didn't make a hammer, you made a bottle opener. Well, it's a great hammer. It's like, I guess it could be, but
they do pull out nails really well. If you bought a hammer just to pull out nails and that's all you used, it would be perfectly a fine investment.
Yeah, but if I found my hammer was better at opening paint cans than actually hammering in nails, that'd be a problem with the fact that I could have bought a paint can opener for 30 cents. Yeah. But that's kind of my problem with. And so Twitter is also like it what it's intended to do was, I guess what Jack Dorsey intended it to do was admirable. What it actually does is despicable. And so what I did with it was disengage. I have not touched Twitter. I refuse to touch Twitter. And I want to do the same thing for Facebook because the darkness.
But I forced you into it.
Well, yeah, I was about to delete it because I was just like, I guess this would be a great way to get this podcast out. But the darkness is there. Like, I see it. I just opened it up here and I'm scrolling and there's one thing here that's like, they'll get my thing up. Oh, I can't believe that's happening. Oh, what's this? Oh, what's going on with the Ottawa Senators? Oh, Alberta's this. Oh, like,
but again, the proof is in the pudding. People actually want Facebook pages. That's why every business has one, because it's free to put up and people actually go to it and use it and like rely on it for info. Instead of Google searching and looking up in the phone book like they used to, they just check Facebook.
Right. So my guess, my guess what I'm trying to say here is, this is, I guess, a good example for the whole conversation is that with Facebook and Twitter, you don't have to fully disengage, but you should be disengaging. You should not put your life, you should not do this and that. Use it for just one thing and then disengage. And then realize that every time you go in, you're in danger. And realize that you're in danger. Put some.
And if you ever get emotional from social media, stop. Because that's not what it's not healthy. It's not good for you. It doesn't help anybody. just getting incensed for the sake of seeing something so that some advertiser can make money off your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
It's like,
Every time you check Facebook or Twitter, if you get angry or sad or happy, stop, because that's harmful.
Unless it's like, okay, like you listen to, I don't know, I listened to one of, there's gradients of that, because there was a Jordan B. Peterson podcast I listened to, and he's interviewing there was a guy he was interviewing for like 3 hours, a guy who was arrested and taken to Guantanamo Bay. He's just letting him tell his story. That made me emotional. Like, that got me a response. I was like, oh my God, this poor guy.
But that's the podcast. It's not
that's a podcast. That's right? Okay. But if like if someone's being like, can you believe this? Like, I'm just scrolling through here. There's like 3 can you believe this is. And if you get that like indignant, get off. But it's great for like, honestly, I do check it for certain companies that are in town who use it as their website.
Or it's like browsing YouTube incognito without your search history. I keep forgetting that there's a YouTube that's beyond me because everything's so custom tailored, right? And I've been on YouTube since 2002 or something. So like my feed through YouTube is just constant lectures, engineering videos, that podcast, that type of thing. I forget that what other people are looking at is like, I sold a house for $1 million. I put this cat in this box. I hung from a ceiling for 2 days. Like, just
I walked around in Germany with yoga pants on. It's like 30 million views. It's like,
and I'm so used to watching videos with like 4-digit views, like 1,500 or 200 or 800. You know what I mean? Like, I forget that there's actually 50 million people watching Mr. Beast.
I don't even know who that is.
I didn't until this week.
Well, and it's like,
figured this out, and this guy,
I only noticed this when I go
like
into,
fills a pool with Jello or something like that. Like, it's just useless shit.
It's like, and I think that's one of the things that, like, to bring him up again, I guess Jordan B. Peterson says, like, do you even like watching that shit? But like, I noticed this when I upload videos, because I go into Frivolous Gravitas, I click, switch accounts, and then I look, and I look here, the German sauna culture, nudity and all. It's like, and there's this like hot chick with a robe on, and you're just like, oh, I want to look at the hot. It's like, no, just disengage, and you get, let's see here, vaccine, a day in the life of a star chef, just Friends bloopers, something about DMX. Didn't he?
I gotta be honest, that bores me to tears. Like, even just hearing about it, listing off all the stuff that I'm not interested in.
I'm just like stuff from Big Bang. It was like, I can't, like, it. That is like,
but that sort of takes us all the way full circle back to the whole Nietzsche thing, and like
that's the darkness
representation of the.
I look in that and I get indignant. I get angry. It's like, why would people watch like 45 million people?
I know, look at you.
And that's the darkness that you're staring into. So what you do? I click back to mine, and I'm like, oh, look, how to retool your sight optic for your rifle. Oh, that sounds like it would be informative. Oh, look, a podcast on this. Oh, look, Kris just did a podcast on programming JavaScript. God,
you're boring me.
And so, but
I think that's where most people misrepresent Nietzsche, is they propose some type of nihilistic view and consider all of this type of writing as this type of nihilism. And then they separate things out into categories. And one of those categories is like Emil Durkheim's Anno Me. And then the other category is Mr. Beast selling a house for $1. Like, it's just, the world's not like that. And any time that something gets taken out of context in that way, we should be, like, as a society of intelligent, individual, free-thinking people, supposedly everybody's smart. If you interview them and ask them, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm smarter than average, I drive better than average, but obviously that can't be true for more than half of the population. I think that's the problem with our approach to knowledge these days, is the acceptance. We're so ready to accept whatever type of media or information is approaching us, unless, even if it's scientific, unless it's something we disagree with already. Yeah. But you don't need to be informed more if you already have an opinion. You need to be more open the more information you're gathering. Mm-hmm. So we're doing the opposite of what we should do as like competent human beings. And that's, when approached with new information, we should readily consider it, regardless of how it sounds or how stupid it looks. But we're doing the opposite. We only readily consider things we already agree with, things that are easy, and that's why I call it mental laziness.
Yeah, and if anyone tells you it's like, oh, you know everything you need to know, it's like, no, you should be approaching everything from a point of ignorance. And when someone doesn't approach, you seem like a smart guy. It's like, what are you trying to sell me?
Yeah, exactly. Get your hand off my foreskin.
Yeah. It's like,
but it's like that Feynman quote or whatever. I can't remember it exactly. I'm probably going to bastardize it, but it's something like a scientist who doesn't think, or who doesn't consider the facts, is no smarter than the average or the everyday guy, or something like that. He's got another one too that's like, I was born knowing nothing, and I have this little time on earth to figure out more than nothing. Like, yeah, the acceptance and awareness and self regulation of the ideas and beliefs that we have and consume, I think, is really important. And I guess that's the last mention or note I'll make of that.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap up. So just pay attention, be self-aware about where the darkness is entering your life. Don't let it control you, unless like you really want to, but no. I guess all I have to say is turn off the news and think for yourself.
And if you're listening to this podcast, listen to more of our podcasts.
Yes. You seem like a smart guy.
That's funny.
Anyway.
Share, and subscribe.
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks for listening.
See you guys next week.
Bye.